I'm Lee Lavery. I'm from North East Wales. I'm a local lad. I joined the Green Party in 2021. I'm trying to think of the reason why. There's so many different reasons why I joined the Green Party, but I think the focus on social justice and climate justice, and they go hand in hand. So absolutely, that was a reason why I joined. I didn't really do much for about a year, and then we had local elections in 22, and I helped out at a campaign in Prestatyn, and we won. So that was kind of, that got me started to think, oh, actually, I can make a difference. So I stood in the general election in 2024, and I was selected to be the lead candidate for Fflint Wrecsam last year. So I was educated locally. I went to uni in Durham, and then I spent a couple of years in London. That was too busy for me, so the lure of hiraeth brought me back to North East Wales. I cared for my parents for a number of years, so I absolutely know the struggles that carers go through, and particularly unpaid carers. And now I work for a mental health charity that covers North East Wales. I suppose it's just the fact that I get to represent the local area, and I suppose I've always been engaged with politics, and it's a real honour actually just to be somebody that gets to represent that area and gets to listen to all of the people's opinions and views, and maybe make a difference. Hopefully, make a difference. I think cost of living is the biggest issue actually. I was listening on the radio this morning. I think it was on the Today programme, and people are saying, well, of all the different issues, really, people find it very hard to care about other things if they can't pay the bills, if they can't feed their families, if they can't clothe them, if they can't keep the house warm. So that's why we've got policies in our manifesto to build 60,000 social housing properties within the next 10 years, to bring in immediate rent freezes, and then look at rent caps as well, rent controls. And we would abolish council tax and bring in a land value tax, which would benefit those who are less well off. If I had a magic wand, that would be that is a huge problem. And there's various different issues. I think there's issues of accountability maybe and scrutiny. We really need to get into the depths of it and just to see what a lot of the issues are. I think ultimately we need to see if a restructuring is possible, or just look at what some of the issues are and what some of the stumbling blocks are. I know there's issues with people staying longer than they need to in the hospitals, so we need to look at social care just to make sure that people are in the right place, and if they don't need to be in hospital for medical reasons, then they can go into social care. So it's a big, complex problem, and I think we'd need to really think about what's the best way. So I know Anthony Slaughter at the manifesto launch said he doesn't like the term red line. Seems a bit positive, but I think housing is a big thing. So as I mentioned before about rent controls, we'd look to bring that in, and definitely, say potentially they were applied being the largest party, then we'd look to ensure that we have a vision for a bold and a more confident Wales. Well, ultimately, you could decide the amount that you want to generate over the whole of a local authority or the whole of Wales. So you can ensure that the amount that's generated is the same, or slightly more, or slightly less. But ultimately, it would mean that those who are living in properties where the value of the land is a smaller percentage of the actual value of the property, they would pay less. So we would then ensure that is then passed on to renters potentially who are renting in those properties. So it would obviously be people that work within Welsh companies. It is definitely it's a goal, and I think it might take a little bit to get there. But ultimately, it's all about well-being and a balance and a work-life balance. And I think you look at things like the carrier bag charge, for example. That was a really good way that Wales could show the way, to lead the way for the rest of the UK in how you can do these things. So ultimately, if we brought it in, and it would potentially affect a percentage of the Welsh population, but that would definitely then show the rest of the UK that actually we can do this. So I think Wrexham is definitely the capital of North Wales, which it absolutely is, and you know, over the past several years has absolutely become. You need to ensure that you've got really good transport links. So I'm really keen to see good transport links to Liverpool, for example. I know that's planned, but the funding isn't absolutely 100% certain. But I'd love to see the Merseyrail network extended down to Wrexham with battery trains, and I know that that's possible and it's doable. But we need to work with partners across the border, which, of course, in North East Wales, we all know, you know, we're very closely tied to people over the border there. I think the rent controls. I think that's something. I know we've mentioned it a few times, but for the people that are renting, they're being taken advantage of by private landlords, and we need to ensure that that's controlled and that the rent that they're paying is proportionate. It has a huge impact on people. I think people, well, I would hope that people would find life less of a struggle, so they'd be able to budget. You know, their bills would potentially be more manageable, their rent would be more manageable. They would potentially have a better work-life balance as well, and not just your economic output, but your well-being is taken into account as well, which obviously from having a mental health background, that's hugely important. I think ultimately it's about hope. So the Green Party is a party of hope. We want to make positive changes to people's lives, and that's why you should vote for us. I'm not a career politician. You know, I've lived a life. I've worked as a carer. Well, actually, I was an unpaid carer. I work at a mental health charity. I know that a lot of the suffering that people are going through. I'm not a career politician, and yeah, absolutely. Just let's vote for hope.